The Senate Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, if you could please call the roll.
Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Krasner. Here. Chair Flores.
Present. Please let the record reflect all members are present. We have a quorum. I want to remind everybody to please silence your cell phone. I am doing that myself as we speak. We have 4 items on the agenda. As you know, we will be summoned to the floor right around 4:30, 4:40 p.m., which means we may have to recess. I do intend to take the items on the agenda in the order they appear. As I previously mentioned, we have 4 bills. I ask for the purposes of brevity, particularly to our members, if you know the answer to a question, not that we do this often, no need for us to play that game. If there's stuff that we need to get clarified, let's do that. For those of you who are testifying support, opposition, or neutral, particularly those of you who are in support of a bill, the best way to support a bill today is by not extending your words. If you're in opposition, please utilize your 2 minutes, explain why you hate something. I don't want to limit you, but if you support something, you care a lot about it, say your name, I like it, and that's good enough for us today. So with that, we're going to go open up the hearing on Senate Bill 52. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Flores, Vice Chair Orenshaw, members of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. My name is Michael Morton, Special Assistant Attorney General for Attorney General Ford. I am simply here to introduce the real expert on AB 52, Chief Deputy Attorney General over our Boards and Open Government Division, Rosalie Bordilov, who will walk you through the provisions of this bill and answer any questions that the committee may have.
And thank you. And with that, we'll go to Las Vegas.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosalie Bordilov. I'm honored to be here and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm the chief of the Boards and Open Government Division of the Attorney General's Office. This division houses the Open Meeting Law Enforcement Unit within the AG's office, in addition to representing many state agencies governed by public bodies. Assembly Bill 52 includes revisions to NRS Chapter 241, which is Nevada's open meeting law, and a few other chapters relating to the open meeting law's application. I would like to start with a brief overview of Nevada's open meeting law as it stands today before describing the revisions contained in the bill. Nevada's open meeting law, or OML, was first passed in 1960 and is considered a sunshine law. Sunshine laws exist in many states and are laws requiring public disclosure of government agency meetings and records. In enacting the law, the Nevada Legislature declared that all public bodies exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business, and it is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and their deliberations be conducted openly. This intent is stated in NRS 241.010. When I conduct trainings on this law to public bodies across the state, I emphasize the importance of this provision as it guides the interpretation of the law both by our office and by the courts. Nevada courts have stated that the OML was promulgated for the public's benefit and as such should be construed in favor of openness and transparency. The OML applies to meetings of Nevada public bodies, both of which are terms defined in Chapter 241. A public body is defined in 241.015 Section 4 and includes any administrative, advisory, executive, or legislative body of the state or local government consisting of 2 or more people, which expends, disperses, or is supported in whole or in part by tax revenue, or which makes collective decisions or recommendations to such a body, and is created by the state constitution, a statute, regulation, city or county charter or ordinance, executive order, or formal resolution. Subcommittees of public bodies are also public bodies themselves. The legislature is exempt from the OML by 241.016, although it often follows many of the same procedural standards, such as publishing agendas, allowing public comment, and facilitating public access to meetings. The OML only applies to meetings of public bodies, which is defined as a quorum of the body together with deliberation or action. A quorum is generally defined as a simple majority of the public body, or another proportion established by law. Deliberation is to collectively weigh, examine, reflect, discuss, while action is a majority vote. So the OML does not prevent all private discussions by the members of a public body, only those that involve a quorum. Additionally, the OML does not prevent a gathering of a quorum of public body members at a social or professional function so long as there is no deliberation or action. The open meeting law imposes several requirements on public bodies, including the posting of a full agenda that clearly and completely describes all items to be discussed and is posted not later than 9 a.m. on the third working day prior to the meeting. The meeting agenda must be posted on Nevada's notice website, which is notice.nv.gov, at the public body's principal office, and the public body's website if it maintains one. Any person requesting a copy of the agenda must also have a notice sent to them. The agenda outline requires public comment periods at the beginning and end of each meeting or before action items. It further requires that all supporting material be made available to the public when it is provided to members of the public body. Public bodies are also required to keep minutes of their meetings that include the substance of discussions and actions. Exceptions to the OML are few and narrow. Public bodies may hold closed sessions to consider the character, alleged misconduct, or professional competence of a person. They may also receive information from their attorney regarding potential or existing litigation involving a matter over which the body has jurisdiction and to deliberate toward a decision outside of the agendized meeting. However, action regarding litigation must be taken during an open meeting unless the public body has delegated that authority to its chair or chief executive. Additionally, emergency meetings are authorized in the law, but may only be used to address truly unforeseen circumstances, such as disasters or health and safety emergencies. The open meeting law requires the public have an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Reasonable limitations may be time, place, and manner restrictions. A public body can never restrict comment based upon the viewpoint of the speaker. Presiding officers may limit comment when comments are unduly repetitious or willfully disruptive. The OML also does not prohibit the removal of any person who willfully disrupts a meeting to the extent its orderly conduct is made impractical. Any action taken in violation of the OML is void, and the Office of the Attorney General has statutory enforcement power to investigate and prosecute violations. Additionally, any person denied a right conferred by NRS Chapter 241 may sue to have an action declared void. The public does not have to rely solely on the Attorney General's office for enforcement. Criminal and civil penalties may also apply to members if the violation is knowing. The Office of the Attorney General strives to assist members of the public and public bodies in understanding and complying with this law. We provide training to public bodies across the state and offer training videos on our website available to anyone. There is a Deputy Attorney General assigned to answer open meeting law questions every day. Thank you for indulging in my summary of Nevada's open meeting law. I'm happy to take any general questions regarding the law now, or if the chair prefers, I can move directly to the presentation of AB 52's provisions.
If we could go straight into the presentation, thank you.
Sure. Assembly Bill 52 is the result of several meetings of the Attorney General's Open Meeting Law Task Force, which consisted of representatives of public bodies in state and local government and public interest groups, including the American Civil Liberties Union. The goal of the bill is to allow public bodies to run our government while protecting the public's right to observe and be heard in that process. Section 2 of the bill provides clarification to the definition of a quorum. It provides that when there is a vacancy on a body, that position does not count when calculating a quorum. The law is currently unclear whether a vacant position is counted, which can lead to confusion when a body has multiple vacancies and is trying to hold a meeting. Sections 3, 7, 16, 17, 18, and 19 relocate language from 241.034 to separate the notice required for administrative action against a person from the notice required to acquire real property via eminent domain. The change they changed the notice requirements from 5 working days for personal service to 7 calendar days, and from 21 working days via certified mail to 14 calendar days. Section 3 also provides for alternative methods of notice for an employee of the public body. Many public bodies make direct employment decisions regarding certain positions, such as the superintendent of a school district or the executive director of a state agency. As such, the public body holds a closer relationship with these individuals than they do with the general public. The alternative notice provisions for employees take into account that closer relationship and the need for a body to take certain employment actions on a shorter time frame. Section 4 clarifies that action requires a majority of the voting members of the body, as the law is currently unclear with respect to whether non-voting members are counted when making the calculation. It also cleans up language for purposes of continuity with the provisions added by AB 253 from last session. Section 4 further adds a definition of administrative action against a person for purposes of the notice requirements I just discussed. The definition comports with the existing interpretations by the Attorney General's office for this term. Lastly, Section 4 cleans up the definition of a meeting to clarify the existing meaning. Section 6 changes the notice requirements for notice to individuals about whom a public body may consider their character to mimic those in Section 3, and provides for the same alternative methods of notice for employees as in Section 3. Section 8 adds language to provide continuity in the chapter as cleanup. Sections 9 and 10 provide that the quorum reduction provision in the ethics law, NRS chapter 281A.420, section 5, applies to all public bodies in the state of Nevada. Currently, the language of this provision does not apply to bodies comprised entirely of elected officials in a county whose population is 45,000 or more, unless the official has written advice from an attorney regarding their ethical conflict. The current language is ambiguous with respect to statewide entities and could be construed to apply a different ethical standard to the votes of elected officials in rural counties. The proposed change would apply the same ethical standard and quorum reduction ability to all bodies across the state. Sections 5, 11, and 12 exempt committees of private citizens created by city councils or the Secretary of State to draft the background for ballot questions from the OML. It is clear from the legislative history of these committees that they were not intended to be public bodies, and in most circumstances, they would not meet the definition of a public body. The same such committees created by county commissions already have an identical exemption. Sections 13, 14, and 15 provide that library foundations, parent-teacher associations, and certain university foundations are not public bodies unless they otherwise meet the definition of a public body contained in 241.015. This clarification codifies existing Nevada Supreme Court case law and is intended to update the statutes since the definition of a public body was changed in 2011. That concludes the proposed changes contained in AB 52. In closing, AB 52 makes clarifications and revisions to the existing open meeting law in an effort to strike the appropriate balance between allowing public bodies to efficiently and effectively carry out the public's business and ensuring the public and the media are able to observe and participate in that business. I welcome any questions you have.
Thank you for that presentation. We'll start off with Senator Daly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions relate to the last ones you just talked about, 13, 14, and 15, regarding the library foundations, education foundations, university foundations. And I guess based on what you just said, I'm not exactly sure what court case you're talking about or what definition of a public body you're talking about that was changed in 2011, because I'm looking at the statute under sub A, and it says that the definition there, and it says it can include or does include and includes a library foundation as defined, an education foundation as defined, and the university foundation as defined. So to me, with that language, it just muddies the water. Right now, they're covered under 241, right? They have to have open meetings. So if you put that language there, only if they're a public body, and it clearly states that they are. So I'm not seeing the change that you were talking about. And then you'd have to go back and look to see if they're making a recommendation to another public body, which would capture them. And you're never going to know that when they make their meetings if they don't keep minutes and it's not a public record. So if you can explain that there, because I'm not seeing it. I don't get it.
So the case I'm referring to is called Fruden v. Pilling. It is an unreported case, which is part of why we were hoping to codify the decision in this. But in 2011, the public body definition contained in 241.015 was changed to add the creation prong. So the portion of the definition that says a public body must be created by the Nevada Constitution, a statute, by another public body, that section is what was added in 2011. So prior to that, there existed the statutes, the existing statutes contained in Chapter 388, which is the, I think, the one referring to parent faculty associations, but the other ones existed there prior to 2011. And the Supreme Court case looked at it and said, specifically, this was with respect to a parent faculty association, so a PTA, that they did not meet the creation prong and therefore were not a public body. So as it is, the OML does not apply to them unless unless they otherwise meet that definition. And that was what the Supreme Court case held, was if they met that creation prong, they would be a public body. But as it is, most of these foundations wouldn't meet the creation prong. To use the Parent-Teacher Association example, you have a group of parents who are raising money at times for a school, but they are not making decisions or recommendations regarding the use of taxpayer dollars. And that is the big kind of difference there, is they may raise money for use by a school, but they are not making decisions with respect to taxpayer money that is within the school or making recommendations. And that is a big part of, is basically what underlied that decision. But it was brought to the task force's attention, again, on the Parent Faculty Association side, because there was a worry by school districts as well as by some of members of similar associations that if they were to have to start complying with the open meeting law, and they weren't sure if they did, the school districts would now have to start providing significant administrative support to faculty associations so that they could comply. And that would be quite a drain on school districts' finances and a cost.
Well, instead of your fix, you change the statute on the definition and capture the intent on, because the educational foundations that are in whatever chapter they're in, 388, 750, have been subject to the open meeting law since 1993.
They are not currently, and that's what they're not currently subject to. Are you referring to parent-teacher associations?
I'm referring to an educational foundation as defined in Section 3 of NRS 338750.
So there may be some that are, but parent-teacher associations, which are, I think, included in that, are they're required to comply with the provisions of the chapter, but if they don't meet the definition of a public body, that's where the Nevada Supreme Court has stated that they are not required to comply with the OML if they don't meet the definition of a public body.
So is there a definition between an educational foundation and the PTA? To me, there is. I don't know, but an educational foundation in 338750, is that what you're talking about, is a PTA?
I believe that is the one. I was trying to look which one because I don't have the rest of 338 in front of me. So let me see if I can pull it up and view the rest of that provision other than what's in the language in this.
Well, either way, while you're looking that up, it seems to me rather than putting the language in those sections, and if there's a court case that says, hey, they have to meet these prongs, we can change the definition of a public body and get clear on the intent on if they're an educational foundation that are clearly making some of these other recommendations and various things, or a PTA group, if that's what we want to have not be covered, that we could change the definition while we're here and make it more clear rather than the way you have this, because now it would have to be, did they make a recommendation? They'll be sitting there saying, what can we do? What did we do? Oh, we might have screwed up. We should have had an open meeting law in order to make that suggestion or talk about what we did. It's just going to create confusion, if you ask me.
So, yeah, I'm reading subsection 3 of that portion would include a PTA. And that was the worry, is it doesn't mean that all educational foundations are exempt, because if they are created by a school board and are making recommendations to the school board with respect to how the school board expends its money, they would meet the definition of a public body and would be required to comply with the OML. But if they are simply a PTA who creates a 501c3 to support themselves so that they can have a bank account that is separate from the school's bank account, but they're raising their own money, and they're raising that money to support teachers, they would meet that definition in subsection 3 of 388.750, but they would not meet the definition in 241.015 because they were not created by the school board. They created themselves. They're a nonprofit that is simply a charitable organization.
And I understand, so even though before the court case, so I don't know when the court case came up, but the change was in 2011 and the creation prong, so I don't know when the case came up to that. Were they not complying with the open meeting law prior to the court case, or were they complying with it?
I think most PTAs generally don't comply. I'm finding the case specifically dealt with a PTA that existed prior to the 2011 change and after. And the case was from 2014, December 2014. And it found that that prior to the change in the definition, they were required to comply with the OML. But after the OML's public body definition changed and included the creation prong in 2011, they no longer met the definition. Now, if, like I said, a foundation were created, I guess I'll use the example of, I think sometimes NSHEET has created nonprofits where say it's a school district board as a hypothetical or whoever it is, creates a nonprofit, chooses the members, instructs their own funds to be used so that their staff files the paperwork to create a 501c3. They're choosing the board, and that nonprofit is now making recommendations to it. That would meet the definition because the school board is a public body and they created it. So then it would meet the definition in 241.015 and be required by these statutes to comply with the OML. But the difference is some of these parent-teacher associations or organically created entities, entities that people got together and created themselves to be a charitable organization. They just happened to raise money for a governmental entity because they want to help support a governmental entity. They are not public bodies under the law.
Like one more, and thank you, and I think I'm getting it, but the legislature established the procedure for a library foundation, the education foundation, including the PTAs, and we created this statute. And in that statute, we said, you're covered by the open meeting law. Whether they complied with it from 1993 to 2011 or 2014 when this court case came out remains to be seen. But they were covered by it because statute clearly says, and it doesn't matter who created it until we changed that law in 2007, which was an unintended consequence in my view. So this proposed fix, to me, muddles the water. So now it's a matter of they have to do an analyzation before every meeting to say, are we going to be captured by the open meeting law based on what we're going to discuss or what we might do. And if they do cross that line and they didn't do the open meeting, so it muddles the picture. So if it's a problem with the creation and the various things, and we intended these people to be covered, we should correct the change and fix the mistake that was made or the unintended consequence in the definition rather than the way it's trying to be fixed here. That's my opinion, and that's what I'm hoping to work on with this bill.
I would be open to looking at other language if there is, suggestions to another way to get there. It wouldn't be each meeting that the analysis would have to be done. The analysis would be done with respect to each body because, again, this is the creation prong. So it depends on how the body was created. And that is where the analysis would be done. And a body would have to and should already be doing this because this isn't necessarily changing the law. This is codifying how the laws have already been interpreted by the Nevada Supreme Court. But I would definitely be open, and I think the Attorney General's office would be happy to work with you if there's alternative language you have in mind.
And thank you. And I know you know as well as I do that whatever that case law was and that precedent, various things, if then the language in the creation, if you will, or in that definition is changed, they have to re-examine the whole case and the whole thing. So basically that case and that precedent, published or not, is going to not maybe have the same analysis. You'd have to have a new case in order to determine if that's done. So we can fix it there rather than muddying the waters the way you have it.
Members, any additional questions? We'll go to Vice Chair.
Thank you, and I'll keep my question brief, but on section 11, the new language proposed on page 18, the new paragraph 9, lines 22 through 24, had there been an issue with the ballot, the committees coming up with the ballot questions in the past where the open meeting law compliance was an issue? I just wonder if you could give us the background as to why this proposed new language there at NRS 293.252. Thank you.
Sure. So this is, there are two changes I think that are identical on this one, but this got brought to the task force because there was a worry by the governmental agencies creating these bodies that do they now need to offer that administrative support? Because usually they are appointing individuals whose job is to essentially be partisan, right, in what they write. They're writing the for and the against for a ballot question. And they're writing the language that's going to go into the sample information for ballots. And the question was sort of brought to our task force of, is this something, do we need to start providing administrative support? They don't appear to meet the definition of a public body unless there's administrative support offered. And the worry was, if we give them a conference room where they can sit down and talk to each other, are we now supporting them by tax revenue? If we give them an email address, are we supporting them by tax revenue, such triggering the open meeting law because they otherwise aren't really supported by tax revenue because they're comprised of non-government employees? These are not government employees who comprise these. And in researching the legislative history, it appeared that they weren't intended to be. The bills that created the ballot committees that we're looking to exempt right now were passed the same session but different bills than the exemption given to the county commissions. And it seemed a little odd that those committees created by counties have an exemption, but those created by the Secretary of State or those created by city councils do not. And so the hope was to clarify that these were not intended to be public bodies. From legislative history, it did not appear that they were intended to be.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Deputy Attorney General. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, I want to thank you for your presentation. If you could sit back, more questions may arise after we hear the opposition. But if you could just sit back for now, and at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 52. And if there's anybody in Las Vegas wishing to testify, if you could please occupy the seats there. We'll start in Carson City, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores, committee members. For the record, my name is Steve Walker. I'm representing the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners, who unanimously voted to support AB 52. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please.
Thank you, Chair Flores, members of the committee. Jennifer Berthium, Government Affairs Manager at the Nevada Association of Counties. NACO's in support of AB 52 and thanks the Attorney General for his continuous engagement of local governments on this matter and for including NACO on the Open Meeting Law Task Force. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Anyone else wishing to join us in support of Assembly Bill 52? Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas BPS, do we have anybody in support Assembly Bill 52?
If you would like to testify in support of AB 52, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go to those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 52. We'll start with those wishing to testify over the phone.
If you would like to testify in opposition to AB 52, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry, did you say in opposition to?
We are in opposition. We are on the phone, and then we'll go
Yes.
to Las Vegas.
Thank you.
For the record, this is Bruce Parks, BRUCE-PARKS, Chairman of the Washoe County Republican Party. I'm in total opposition to AB 52. When you do not have a quorum to conduct business, there should be no business conducted. Removing the quorum requirements actually means that constituents in whatever district that body, that public body representative that's missing, those constituents are not represented. Additionally, the very idea of the open meeting law in the state of Nevada, when you submit open meeting law complaints that are not investigated, I don't understand why you would create a law that is never enforced. Not a law, it's a suggestion. At that point, I've submitted numerous open meeting law complaints myself. No resolution whatsoever, and when I call and contact the Attorney General's office, I hear the same thing. It's being investigated. Additionally, the emergency provisions in this bill, we just came out from underneath horrendous emergency provisions that absolutely quelled the voice of the people at numerous public bodies. Those emergencies conditions lasted for entirely too long. This bill, in my opinion, does nothing to enhance the public's confidence in their representation in public bodies and does more harm than good by suppressing the people's ability to redress their government with their grievances. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 52.
Good afternoon, honorable Senate members. My name is Eva Romero. I'm an attorney and native Nevada testifying in opposition to AB 52. I appreciate the monumental task of working in a legislative session for months on end, taking time away from your families and personal lives to deliberate and consider over 1,000 bills presented which ultimately impact Nevadans. As you continue to hear testimony on various bills, I'm sure there are some you are either unfamiliar with altogether or at the very least uncertain as to the impact they will ultimately have on Nevadans. With full acknowledgement of your Herculean task, I respectfully submit that this is not one of those instances. The negative impact of the Attorney General's proposed revisions to open meeting law presented in AB 52 has already happened to my colleague Hardeep Saul and to me, much to our detriment. We appreciate our written submission to the Senate members is rather lengthy, possibly more so than you're used to, but I implore you to take the time to review it, all of it, so you can see for yourselves the problems occurring even with the open meeting law process as it currently stands, and how the Attorney General's attempt to revise the law actually eases the burden of state boards and agencies having to be transparent in their practices and affords them the ability to disrespect and violate the due process rights of Nevadans. In short, the Attorney General, as both legal counsel and enforcer for these state boards and agencies, rarely enforces or punishes its own clients. To be clear, the Attorney General's interest in passing AB 52 is to protect its own clients, not Nevadans, not private citizens. Passing AB 52 will continue to erode transparency in government and rob the people of their constitutionally protected due process rights, resulting in immediate harm to the public you all have the duty and privilege to serve. This issue does not follow a particular party line. It's a problem that affects all Nevadans regardless of party affiliation. You have a duty and responsibility to protect your constituents, to protect Nevadans by opposing AB 52. Thank you for your time and service.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 52.
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. We'll go to Las Vegas.
Thank you. My name is Fernando Romero, and I am president of Hispanics in Politics. I am here in opposition of AB 52 that will shield and usurp the reasons why we have an open meeting law in the state of Nevada. I am surprised that those proposed changes and amendments have made it through the Assembly and applaud those who oppose the bill. I have attended many board meetings and witnessed too many bad actors. The proposed quorum changes would be problematic since the number would be adjusted and would lead to boards and agencies not wanting to fill their vacancies when it is advantageous for them. This would make boards and agencies political instead of acting for the good of Nevadans. In addition, the AG is now revising notice and service requirements, which does not allow an individual more time but less time, and in some instances reduces by 15 days. I personally have called the Attorney General in opposition and in surprise as to what is happening with the open meeting law, and frankly, he has washed his hands of my complaints. There are many, many compelling reasons and arguments as to why to oppose AB 52. Members of the committee, I urge you to read the compelling written testimony and view the videos submitted by D. Saul and Neva Romero on May 2, 2023, to be thoroughly enlightened as to why I oppose this bill and urge you to do the same. Muchísimas gracias.
And thank you for joining us. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in opposition in Las Vegas? Seeing none in Las Vegas or Carson City, we will move to those wishing to testify in the neutral position. Anybody in Carson City or Las Vegas? Seeing none, BPS, anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 52?
If you would like to testify in neutral for AB 52, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, honorable Senate members. Unfortunately, I had my hand raised in opposition of this bill.
Please proceed.
May I speak? Okay, thank you. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to present my testimony in opposition of AB 52. My name is Dee Saul, also known as Hardeep Saul. I'm an attorney and a proud battle-born Nevadan. AB 52's objective is to protect the Attorney General and its clients, which are boards and agencies. It undermines the accountability and does not protect Nevadans. It is incumbent upon each one of you to protect the Nevadans and not the AG and their clients. As you are aware, open meeting law in Nevada is a set of statutes that govern how public meetings are conducted in the state. The law requires that most meetings be open in the public. In order to conduct a meeting, a quorum must be met for the meeting to proceed. When we start to alter quorum requirements, Nevadans will no longer be protected. Decisions will be unrepresentative. There will be a lack of accountability, a waste of our resources, and embolden these public bodies to misbehave in a manner that is not constitutional. We can all agree that due process is a fundamental pillar of our justice system. The notice and service modifications in this bill will damage the integrity of open meeting law by reducing the number of days for the notice and the more absurd addition of an electronic email to be used as a proper method of delivery, which, as we all know, is problematic. As you are aware, Nevada has a whistleblower protections, and these changes in AB 52 would allow the boards and agencies to retaliate against individuals who report illegal activities or wrongdoing in their workplace. Honorable Senate members, there is no place in Nevada for AB 52. Please protect all Nevadans and keep Nevada's government open and transparent by opposing AB 52. Please remember that a vote for AB 52 is a vote against Nevadans. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We will go back to those wishing to speak in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 52.
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Okay, and with that, if we could have our, oh, never mind, she's already there. If there's any desire to address any of the opposition, but before we do that, we do have a question for you. Vice Chair, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just my additional question, on page 9 of the bill, section 6, the new language at lines 10 through 13 about if the written notice is given by electronic mail, that notice by email, would that be instead of regular mail or certified mail? And would that be if the person wants to be notified by email, or would that just be generally for every member of that body?
Rosalie Bordelove for the record. So you're on page 9 there. This is for employees. It could be directly to the person, or if a person is represented with specific to the matter at hand, electronic mail to their attorney. But if it is not somebody represented or not an employee, for example, if you're going to be taking disciplinary action against a licensee, or a city's going to be citing a property or something of the sort, it would require the mail or personal service.
Thank you. And so a brief follow-up, Mr. Chair, thank you. So then the email would only be to someone represented by an attorney to their attorney. There still would be either mail or, regular mail or personal service if it was something like, citing someone regarding a property thing or licensee complaint.
Correct. So if it could be to the attorney via electronic mail only if the public body has already been corresponding with this attorney, so knows that the individual is represented. So in, for example, a licensing instance, if there's been settlement discussions or something going on and this individual is represented by an attorney in this matter, then the notice could go only to the attorney. But you would have to know that they were represented by an attorney for the specific matter that's being discussed. But if it's something out of the blue, that notice needs to go via certified mail or personal service.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Attorney General. Thank you, Chair.
And if there's any additional closing remarks you wanted to address.
Sure. Two things. I will say, while I can't speak to any specific instances regarding employees, I will note that the majority of employees who are employed directly by public bodies, they are at-will employees. And so they take the job knowing they have no due process rights. They don't have a property interest in their job and aren't entitled to a hearing prior to termination. The provisions here were targeted a lot to help some of our rurals. The school districts, a lot of school districts in our rurals hire every single teacher. The board itself will hire every single employee on a number of them. And this is also state agencies and other agencies, but there are instances when there are a large number of employees who are employed specifically by the body. And the only way that an employment decision can be made is via that public meeting. And then I've heard the quorum issues. The main reason this was included is because there's a lot of confusion regarding the quorum requirements. So we'd be willing to talk if there's alternative suggestions regarding the language on the quorum issue. Our goal here was to get a little bit of clarity in the law with respect to vacancies and whether they count towards a quorum.
And thank you. And I know that there's some folk who have reached out with some concerns. So if I may, on the record, ask that we meet offline with some of them. I think if we have an opportunity to sit down, we could alleviate some of those concerns by just having a formal conversation and just going through some of those sections. I think it may be reading the sections differently and or some specific hypotheticals where they are applying to those sections and they're just concerned that there may be some loopholes there and or issues with transparency. And if you could send it to the entire, actually just send it to our committee staff, the 2011 case that you referenced, that way all members can have
Yes,
that.
I can get that sent.
Thank you.
Yes, I can.
And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 52. Again, thank you for your time and thank you for the presentation. Next, and
Thank you.
And we'll likely have to start the hearing and then unfortunately be called to the Senate floor. But we'll go ahead and open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 60.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Stephen Wood, representing the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities. With me today is David Cherry, the Government Affairs Manager and for the City of Henderson, and Assistant City Attorney Wade Gochner, also from the City of Henderson, and he is joining us at Grant Sawyer. Today we will be presenting AB 60 for your consideration. The idea for this bill was brought to the League of Cities by the City of Henderson, which is one of several cities across the state that has neighborhood improvement districts. Currently, neighborhood improvement districts are established by ordinance after a majority of the property owners within the district support its creation. The ordinance includes what improvements are to be maintained, the exact description of the neighborhood improvement district, including the parcels within its boundaries, as well as the role of assessments on the properties within the district to support the improvement project. Currently, the assessment role must be updated annually, and it must be done through the adoption of a new ordinance. As some of you may know, the ordinance process for local governments is cumbersome, requires multiple public meetings, many staff hours, and publications. The bill seeks to amend NRS Chapter 271 to streamline the process by which these assessments are updated on an annual basis to support the improvements within the neighborhood improvement district by allowing local governing bodies to update the amount of the assessment roll by a resolution. I also wanted to mention that there was an amendment placed on the bill in the Assembly to allow property owners to opt in for electronic notifications in addition to the mail notifications that are sent out in advance of an annual assessment roll update. So with that, I would like to pass it over to David Cherry, who will give you some more information.
Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon, Chair Flores, members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry, Government Affairs Manager for the City of Henderson. Thank you for allowing me to join the Nevada League of Cities in presenting AB 60 today. As Mr. Wood mentioned, neighborhood improvement districts, or what we refer to as NIDs, can only be created through a majority vote of property owners in a defined geographic boundary. It is also important to note that AB 60 does not change any of the existing requirements in statute as they relate to the creation of an NID. The City of Henderson first brought this concept to the Nevada Legislature in 2015 as SB 47, which was signed into law that year. NIDs allow property owners to come together and fund neighborhood improvement projects through an assessment on each of their properties. Local governments administer the assessment and can help property owners with contracting for improvement projects. Owners also have the option to form their own nonprofit entity to manage projects and other needs. In Henderson, we have one NID at the Meridian Estates near Robindale and Pecos Roads. This was formed to replace dead trees, add shrubbery, and remove waste, while also adding grading and irrigation system, accent boulders, and rock mulch, all of which help to preserve the neighborhood's curb appeal, which in turn contributes to maintaining property values. The NID's costs are divided among the neighborhood's 166 property owners and are paid through the annual assessment that is at the heart of AB 60. This common sense legislation seeks to streamline the process for updating the assessment roll once an NID has been created, while maintaining requirements that are meant to ensure the public can participate in the process. AB 60 requires that property owners be given a 21-day notice by mail, or if they request in writing, an electronic notice by email, that the assessment roll is being amended to reflect the new assessment amount, and that they can attend a public meeting where they can provide comment or lodge a protest. The City of Henderson strongly supports AB 60 and believes that it will streamline the process for updating annual NID assessments, resulting in a savings of both time and money. Thank you. Mr. Chair, would you like my colleague, Assistant City Attorney Wade Gochner, to walk the committee through the bill section by section, or we can stand for questions, whatever you prefer?
I think in the interest of time, we could, well, we're going to be cut off anyway, so let's just walk through the bill, and then we'll likely have to ask questions after. So
Thank you.
We'll go to Las Vegas. If you would just want to walk us through those sections real quick, and then we'll end it there.
Thank you, Chair. Wade Gochner, Assistant City Attorney for the City of Henderson, for the record. Again, the current language provides for a different process. What we're trying to do is streamline that process, and that is primarily seen in Section 3 of the bill. Section 1 and Section 2 are conforming changes, but Section 3 is the heart of this bill. And what we're trying to do is to streamline the process from what is essentially now a 3 to 4 meeting of the public body process, i.e. meaning a minimum of 2.5 months to get this process complete, to a single meeting of the public body while preserving the exact same notice and actually slightly increasing that notice. So what it does is it says instead of annually setting a brand new assessment, setting a brand new assessment lien, we have a lien in place and it just amends the amount of the assessment. What happens is the city or local body conducting the neighborhood improvement project will send out written notice via certified or registered mail, which is consistent with what is already done in practice. We will send it out at least 21 days as opposed to the 20 days that's under current statute. As Mr. Cherry pointed out, due to an amendment in the Assembly, there is also an option for a homeowner and or tenant of that property to opt into an email notice on an annual basis, which would again allow us another opportunity to provide some notice. What would happen is instead of the public body having to have a hearing to pass a resolution, that resolution setting a public hearing later on, the notices go out, you have a public hearing of the body that listens to the complaints, they take care of whatever objections may occur, and then they would have to move on to the ordinance process, which is reading a bill and title at one meeting, skipping into the next meeting to actually adopt that ordinance. Again, potentially as much as 4 public meetings. Now at this point, we will send out the notice 21 days in advance, tell the residents, the owners or the tenants that there's going to be a meeting of the public body, just as we in fairness to the prior bill, an open meeting law meeting that is published, that is noticed. We're going to tell them when that meeting is. We're going to tell them the time of that meeting, tell them that they can come and raise any objections at that meeting or supply written objection prior to the meeting. They're going to have the ability to come and speak on that. And then at the meeting, the council would do the exact same thing that they've done previously and walk through the meeting. After that, the council will simply have to pass a resolution, which only requires a single meeting and can be done at that same meeting, that sets the assessment. One other advantage of this new process is under the old process, The notice that they received said, the assessment roll is available with the city clerk. You can go look at it and try to figure out what your assessment is. What we have done now is we've said in the notice that they are going to receive, we are telling them what their assessments will be for the following year. And again, as Mr. Cherry pointed out, this is not in any way changing the initiation or creation process. This is only after a neighborhood improvement district has been created. It will allow us to then streamline the process, and that streamlining will result in fewer costs being passed on to the neighborhood as part of the assessments. I stand for any questions.
And thank you. And with that, we will go into recess, and we will come back at the call of the chair, which will be immediately after the congressman finishes his remarks, and we close out the Senate floor. We are in recess. Yeah. The Senate Committee on Government Affairs will come back to order, and we will welcome back our presenters for Assembly Bill 60. For those of you following along, we previously had a detailed breakdown of Assembly Bill 60, and now we will open it up for questions. Members, Senator Daly, please.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you guys for coming and talking to me on this. I just have, I think, one little clarifying question, because you're moving some things around, changing it, and I get down to section 3 where you want to try to do this by an ordinance. But then when you go back and look at some of the provisions that you're striking out, which I think is in section 2, where you're taking out 271, 377, and you're replacing it with the 380 and 385, both of which are contained within the part that you're striking out. So you still have that. You're still going to do once in June, you're going to do the rolls, and that's where you get it. You're going to send out the notice and do all of those things. So and I think I'm reading the rest of it where you're striking out the other parts, and then when you get to the by resolution, which is the streamlining you're trying to do. So my really only concern is where you strike out the provisions on sub 2 starting at line 15 on page 3, so section 3 sub 2, and you say that you'll hold a public hearing upon that, and you change that to shall consider the amendment at a meeting of the public body. So to me, considering something and holding a public hearing are two different things. And I know you're trying to streamline it. You still intended, based on your testimony, to have a public hearing. But again, the intent versus what the words say, I always want to make sure the words hit the intent. Because if it just says it's just going to be considered at a public meeting, theoretically, I'm assuming you didn't have any objections or whatever, and I don't know if you get them very often, it could end up on a consent calendar, and that's very different than having a public hearing, where you have to have a hearing, you have to agendize it as a hearing, you have to then, we're opening the hearing on X, versus just consider at a public meeting. So that's my only concern, if we could clarify or make an adjustment there on that to make it clear that you're going to have a hearing, because that's different than just considering it at a meeting.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator Daly. We appreciate the question. And I'm going to ask Mr. Gochner, because he is our legal
If I
expert.
could just have you identify for the record.
Yes,
please.
sir. Thank you. David Cherry, Government Affairs Manager for the City of Henderson. I wanted to preface it before I asked Wade to speak to the legal question here about just saying that you were absolutely correct of what the intent is. The intent was to require the public meeting so that members of the public, as I testified to, could come and give testimony on the record or lodge an objection. If you are a property owner, you have the right to protest the assessment. So that is the goal of the bill, and what we felt was in keeping with what the original law required, but again, with the streamlining in mind. So with that being the preface there, I'll ask Mr. Gochner to please weigh in on the senator's question, if you would, Wade.
Certainly, Wade Gochner, Assistant City Attorney, for the record. Again, addressing the senator's question, the reason we made this change in part is because public hearing has specific connotations, and those connotations include the fact that you have to pass a resolution. Setting a public hearing, you set the time and date, you set that for more than 20 days out, you have the required publication, you have the notice by certified mail, and certainly I see your point about at a public meeting of the governing body versus a consent agenda item versus what we would agendize as a public hearing. One of the things, and again, this could be clarified through language if you we would certainly be more than willing to work with you to provide a clarifying language, but the City of Henderson's process, at least, and I'm sure it's fairly similar in most jurisdictions, would be that if we receive any comment at all, if anybody comes to the meeting, we will pull that item from any consent agenda and consider it separately, allowing the public to have their say on the item. So I don't know if that satisfies your concerns about how this might be. The other option would be to consider this as a new business item so that it is in fact a separate item with its own separate, not considered as jointly part of a consent agenda. But I'm open to any suggestions that allow us, again, to have it at a single meeting, which is what the intent is, and I think you recognize that as well, So that's, I hope I've answered your questions.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think there might be a couple of ways to address it. I just want to, and you said you can put it on as something as new business, which then has a different connotation than a hearing. And if you have to do a whole bunch of hoops to have a hearing, and then you have to come back and do the resolutions, two different things, you could maybe put it in to say, if there are any objections pursuant to whatever it is, then it has to, that you have to have, maybe not a hearing, so you don't end up with the two-step process, but that it has to be considered, can't be put on the consent agenda. So theoretically, if there were no objections, I'm not seeing why you couldn't, put it on a consent agenda. So there's a couple ways to handle it. Let's just think about it and maybe make sure that that's very clear. I understand intent, and you've probably heard me say this before, but if that's not what the words say, then we should be clear on the intent, make the words match.
Members, any additional questions? Senator Krasner, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. When I met with Mr. Cherry, you were a little bit unclear on who the bill would apply to. And you said it would apply to any city government, county government, and you included city council and county commissioners. But you said you weren't sure if this would apply to the Board of Trustees of a general improvement district or a township. So I was wondering if you found that answer.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And I had sent you some subsequent information about that, but I know obviously you get a lot of information, a lot of emails from a lot of people, so thank you for allowing me to clarify that on the record. And I would welcome Mr. Gochner to weigh in after I give my answer, but the way I read it was any county, city, or town, so it does exclude a GID. Mr. Gochner testified to that in our first House committee hearing, but am I correct in my interpretation there? And I should say for the record, first off, David Cherry, Government Affairs Manager for the city, and also not an attorney. So I'll refer to the actual attorney in the room here that represents the city.
Wade Gochner, Assistant City Attorney for the record. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that question. I heard the question, but I don't have the statute with me here, but generally it applies to district, or it has to apply to governmental bodies that have the ability to enforce liens and assessments against real property. To the extent, certainly counties have that ability, certainly incorporated cities have that ability. I'm unfortunately just not certain to the level down to a township, and I don't believe a township would necessarily, because that would usually be done at the county level, and I don't think a some sort of district like a water district or an irrigation district or something like that would have the ability to do anything that's not specific to the statute, and this particular change would not apply to those kind of specific projects.
And before we continue with the questions, we could go to our legal.
Yes.
I believe we have an answer for you, Senator. Please.
Thank you. For the record, this is Heidi Clarkson with the Legislative Council Bureau. Chapter 271 relates to local improvements, and it provides certain authorities to governing bodies of a public body. And governing body, I apologize, my computer's down, so I'm looking at the books. NRS 271-115 defines governing body to mean the City Council, City Commission, Board of County Commissioners, Board of Trustees, Board of Directors, Board of Supervisors, or other legislative body of the public body. So then we have to look at the definition of what is a public body for purposes of this chapter. That is defined in NRS 271-185. Public body means the state of Nevada or any agency, instrumentality, or corporation thereof, or any municipality, school district, or other type of district or other subdivision of the state, excluding the federal government. So Senator Krasner, I believe your question was whether this would apply to a GID. Yes. I think that it is possible that they would be under the definition of a public body, not specifically for purposes of what of the bill of what, but I think under the general authority of what this chapter provides. I think if a GID had a neighborhood improvement district, this could possibly apply to them as well.
Thank you very much for that information. My next question would be, would this reduce the public's ability to participate in this process by having only one hearing?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Our belief is that it wouldn't, in so much as that one of the things that we do keep on our, thank you, David Cherry, Government Affairs Manager for the City of Henderson. We do keep, obviously, the requirement in place that we notify all of the property owners. We do that either through mail, or if somebody provides in writing a request that we would send it to them via email, they can also be notified that way. In addition, because we would require this to be done at a public hearing that must adhere to open meeting law, it would be agendized. Those agendas are published. They are available. This practice at the City of Henderson is if you request to be on a list, we would mail them out to you either electronically or in hard copy form. So you would be able to avail yourself of that information, and you would be able to come and participate in the public meeting. We're giving a 21-day advance notice, so people would be able to participate that way. They can also submit their comments for the record, and those are entered into as backup information that's provided to the mayor and council for their consideration when they're reviewing any agenda item. So we believe that we're offering the public multiple opportunities to participate, whether they can actually attend in person at the meeting or not, because they can go ahead and provide that information in writing to be included as part of the record. Obviously, we also, as elected officials, our mayor and council hear from their constituents all the time. So if somebody just reached out and wanted to make sure that they informed the mayor and council of their position, that information would be included in the backup material as well. So if somebody logged a phone call or an email, those things are entered as well and shared with the members of the governing body of the city. And again, this is the City of Henderson's practice. So to answer your question, Senators, we really believe that we have kept within the spirit of what this law requires, which is that we give the public an opportunity to participate. In our experience, since we've created our neighborhood improvement district in the City of Henderson, we have found that after the creation process, when we came to the adopting the new assessment role each year, we have not had a lot of public participation. Nobody has come forward to lodge a protest, and we really haven't had a lot of public comment around it. And that's why we just felt like it was reasonable for us to come and ask for this streamlining to take place. But we didn't remove the requirements on us as local governments to notify the public or to have the public meeting. So we think that we're probably, or excuse me, I shouldn't say probably, but we are asking for your permission in looking at this bill to give us that opportunity to streamline this. And again, one of the benefits would be the cost savings that would be passed along to the folks in the neighborhood improvement district, because they would no longer be paying for the cost of the publication in a newspaper of record or the certified mailing that takes place now under the existing law.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, I'll invite you to sit back. Thank you for the presentation. And I'll invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 60, either in Carson City or Las Vegas, to please come forward. Seeing nobody in Las Vegas, we'll start here in Carson, please.
Good evening, Chair Flores and members of the Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, my name is Leonardo Benavides, Government Affairs Manager of the City of North Las Vegas. Here today in support of AB 60. We want to thank the League of Cities and Henderson for bringing forward this bill and for working with us in the interim to address some of our questions, making sure it doesn't touch the LID and SID process as well. And so, for the record, while the city does not currently have any neighborhood and improvement districts within our jurisdiction, we are appreciative for having this additional option forward. It's very late tonight. We are appreciative of having this process here available, while also making sure we still have the public input process as part of this. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Seeing no one else, BPS, do we have anybody on the phone?
Public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 60. Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, BPS, do we have anybody on the phone in opposition?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
And lastly, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position, Carson City or Las Vegas. Seeing none, BPS, anybody on the phone?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go to any closing remarks we may have. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 60. Thank you for the presentation. And next, we'll open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 97. Good afternoon and welcome, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Chair Flores and members of the Senate Government Affairs Committee. I'm Assemblywoman Melissa Hardy, and I represent Assembly District 22 in Clark County. And I want to thank you for scheduling this hearing for AB 97 today. I introduced the bill at the request of the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute. The bill became necessary due to the passage of the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act by the United States Congress. The so-called AIM Act provides authority to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to regulate the production and consumption of hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. HFCs are chemicals typically used as refrigerants, solvents, propellants, and fire suppressants, among other applications. The AIM Act specifically directs the EPA to phase down the supply of HFCs, which are harmful to the environment, and authorizes the EPA to restrict the use of HFCs as we transition to HFC substitutes, which are far better for the environment. Unfortunately, these HFC replacements are not permitted under Nevada codes. AB 97 is intended to address that problem. So to explain the bill further and answer any questions, I have with me Warren Hardy, and we also have Mike Narazi of the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Warren Hardy, representing the American Heating and Refrigeration Institute. Unfortunately, Mr. Narazi he's on East Coast time and had another commitment, so he's not going to be able to join us. I want to thank Assemblywoman Hardy for bringing this forward. This is one of those situations where we kind of get caught up in what's happening in D.C. somewhat. In 2020, as Assemblywoman Hardy mentioned, the Congress adopted the AIM Act, and as part of the AIM Act, it actually requires, the federal EPA is requiring the discontinuation or the phase out of fluorohydrocarbons. And unfortunately, it impacted every state. And so this effort that is before you today is going on in every state in the union. Currently, Maine, Vermont, Tennessee, Texas, Missouri, Colorado, Oregon, Arizona, New York, and Washington are addressing this, and some of them have passed them at this point. But all this bill does is simply say that, because normally, some of you know my history on this, and normally I would argue that these are the types of things that should be done at a local government level as we talk about code and other things. But unfortunately, there's not enough time to do that. So this simply says that any provision of their current codes notwithstanding, local governments cannot prohibit the use of these newer, more efficient, more environmentally friendly refrigerants. And the industry's moving wholesale over to these. There's still stock left on the old stuff that's being sold, but the industry really is taking this charge seriously and is moving completely away from these hydrofluorocarbon refrigeration system. I should mention that Section 1, subsection 2 and 3 are amendments that we adopted at the request of the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Among the things I learned something new every session, and among the things I learned this session is that water is in fact a refrigerant. And we may have unintentionally prohibited the Southern Nevada Water Authority and the local governments from prohibiting the use of evaporative coolers. That was not our intent. So we put language in to make it sure that it was clear that the issues that are being done with regard to evaporative coolers going forward, the banning of evaporative coolers is not impacted by this legislation. So this will bring us into compliance with what the federal government's doing, with what the EPA is doing, and it'll allow folks to continue selling these products and homeowners to continue to take advantage of this. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Members, any questions? Senator Daley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, Warren. I just wanted to give you grief. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
You deserve that, Mr. Chair.
You did look a little concerned.
Yeah, I did deserve that too, Mr. Chair.
Members, any questions? Seeing none, thank you both for the presentation. And at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 97. If you could please come forward, Carson City or Las Vegas.
Good evening. This is Kathy Flanagan representing the Southern Nevada Water Authority. We just want to thank the bill sponsor and Mr. Hardy for working with us, and we support the measure.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Take two. Senator Flores and members of the Committee on Government Affairs, Leonardo Benavides, working for the City of North Las Vegas. I want to thank Assemblywoman Hardy for working with us on this and making sure that we have this amendment here for evaporative cooling, as obviously water conservation is very important in Southern Nevada. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. BPS, is there anybody wishing to join us in support of Assembly Bill 97?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Next, we'll go to those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 97. BPS, anybody on the phone?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Any opposition in Las Vegas or Carson City? Seeing none, BPS, is there anybody wishing to join us in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 97?
There are no callers choosing to testify at this time.
Thank you. Anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position, Carson City or Las Vegas? Seeing none, any closing remarks you may have? No closing remarks. Assemblywoman, it's always great to see you. With that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 97. And we will move over to Assemblyman Mr. Ruben Da Silva. Welcome, sir. And we'll open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 366.
Is it good afternoon or good evening now? I mean, good. Well, good afternoon and good evening, Chair Flores, committee members. I am Ruben Da Silva, representing Assembly District 28 in Clark County. Thank you for the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 366, which revises provisions governing the Keep Nevada Working Task Force. I will be co-presenting with Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff Rudy Pamituan and Deputy Secretary of State Margarita Salas Crespo, who should be there in Vegas. So just a little background information. I'm going to start with some background information before providing an overview of the bill before you today. During the 2021 legislative session, Assemblywoman Selena Torres sponsored AB 376 as a comprehensive bill to support the immigrant community. But for the purposes of this bill presentation, I will focus on the provisions of the 2021 legislation that created the Keep Nevada Working Task Force within the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. The task force was charged with developing strategies to support current and future industries across Nevada and conducting research on ways to strengthen career pathways for immigrants. The task force was further charged with supporting the efforts of business and others to provide workforce stability and recommend approaches to attract and retain immigrant business owners. One of the provisions of the 2021 legislation required the task force to submit a written report to the Director of Legislative Counsel Bureau for submission to the Legislative Commission on or before July 1st, 2022, and on or before July 1st of each subsequent year. While the task force is currently required to meet at least once each quarter, it held 5 meetings in 2022, March 15th, May 2nd, June 29th, September 30th, and December 14th, and it just held its first meeting of 2023 on March 27th. The task force set forth various recommendations in its annual report dated July 1st, 2022. During my short time as a legislator, I have learned that it often takes several sessions to continue to build upon the foundation provided by our predecessors, or in this case, Assemblywoman Torres. I will now quickly summarize the bill. Assembly Bill 366 moves the Keep Nevada Working Task Force from the Office of the Lieutenant Governor to the Office of the Secretary of State and revises the membership of the task force. The bill increases the number of members of the task force from 9 to 10. Currently, 9 members of the task force consist of the Lieutenant Governor or his designee, 7 members appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, and 1 member appointed jointly by the Governor and the Office of New Americans. The bill reconstitutes the task force, with 1 member being the Secretary of State or his designee, 8 members appointed by the Secretary of State, and 1 member appointed by the Lieutenant Governor. Section 9 of this bill allows the members of the task force who are serving on July 23rd to continue, to July 1st, 2023, to continue serving until the Secretary of State appoints members. There is nothing to prohibit the Secretary of State from appointing an existing member if the person meets the qualifications for appointment set forth in AB 366. The duties of the task force remain the same. However, subsection 2 of section 6 authorizes the task force to create subcommittees for any purpose that is consistent with the duties of the task force. This would be a new authority for the task force. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to my co-presenters in Las Vegas. I think first we may have Mr. Pamatawan, or is it, okay, Ms. Salas Crespo.
Thank you so much, and good evening, Chair Flores and Vice Chair Orenshaw, and members of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. My name is Maggie Salas Crespo, and I serve as the Deputy Secretary of State for Southern Nevada. I would like to thank Assemblyman De Silva for inviting the Secretary of State office to co-present Assembly Bill 366 along with the Lieutenant Governor's office. Our office is in full support of moving the Keep Nevada Working Task Force, and we have been working closely with the Lieutenant Governor's office and Assemblyman De Silva to ensure a smooth transition. As stated by Assemblyman De Silva, the task force was charged with developing strategies to support current and future industries across Nevada, supporting the efforts of businesses and others to provide workforce stability, and recommending approaches to attract and retain immigrant business owners. The Secretary of State's office is the first stop for business registration, which is a responsibility we take seriously. Secretary Aguilar has directed us to provide any support to Nevada small businesses that we can, especially those coming from underserved populations. We believe housing the task force within our office will allow us to learn more about the needs of the immigrant workforce and business community to better serve them and guide them through the process to starting or growing their business. We hope to earn your support for this bill, and I stand ready for any questions you may have.
Chairman Flores and committee members, good evening. My name is Rudy Pamantuan, and I serve as the Chief of Staff for our Lieutenant Governor, Stavros Anthony. The Secretary of State and the Lieutenant Governor have a great working relationship and have discussed AB 366 at great length. With the state of Nevada back open with growth and opportunity abound, the Lieutenant Governor and the Secretary of State agreed that all Nevadans should have fair and equal access, especially new Americans and immigrants, ensuring that no Nevadan is left behind. As the Office of the Secretary of State has greater resources and more personnel to focus on the important work of this task force, our Lieutenant Governor, Stavros Anthony, stands in support of AB 366, and our office looks forward to working with the Secretary of State's office to ensure a smooth and strong transition. I'd also like to offer a personal note of thanks to Assemblyman Ruben De Silva for his leadership on this bill, and to Maggie Salas Crespo from the Secretary of State's office for leading efforts to ensure that the task force continues its successful work. Finally, thank you to this committee for your hard work and dedication to our state. I appreciate your time and for allowing me to speak on this bill, and I will also be here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you all three for your presentation, and thank you for preemptively meeting with some of the members and providing some feedback. With that, we'll open it up for questions. We'll start off with Senator Daley, and then we'll go over to Senator Krasner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and trust me, no hard questions. So in Section 5, and I was looking at the previous language when it was under the Lieutenant Governor, it had similar language, but it says you elect a chair and a vice chair. My thought was that the Secretary of State or his designee should be the chair. I don't know if anybody cares on that, but it just seemed to me that would be a little easier. Designate him the chair, and then you just have to elect a vice chair. If nobody wants to do that, that's fine. It was just a suggestion. My second question is in Section 4, Sub 3C, where it says you're going to appoint someone from labor with a statewide presence, and that language seemed odd to me a little bit. So I was curious how has that been interpreted? I don't know if that was language that was in there before. Because statewide presence means different than statewide jurisdiction, et cetera. Some unions, they do have statewide jurisdiction. There's one local union that covers the whole state. other ones have a statewide president, but they may have multiple locals. The letter carriers have statewide presence, but they have multiple locals. So I didn't know how that was going to be interpreted, on that. If we're looking for someone with statewide jurisdiction, statewide presence was confusing to me anyway.
Ruben De Silva for the record. Thank you for the question, Senator. I definitely see the nuance there. And again, if the Secretary of State's office and the Lieutenant Governor's office is willing to work, we can probably try to work on that language, make it a little bit more clear. But I believe the current labor representative is Mr. Vince Saavedra. He's serving on that on the board, and I know that the Building Trades Union has both a northern and a southern component. But if that's the case, then obviously, as long as they have some kind of ability to interact with the state at large, that may suffice as a qualification to serve on this task force.
And this is Maggie Salas Crespo for the record. To add to Assemblyman De Silva, the intent here is to ensure we have a representative that represents labor workers throughout the state of Nevada, and not just in one region, to ensure that we have equal representation for it. But we'll definitely take a look into it to make sure that that is translated clearly in that language. And if we need to make changes, we'll make them.
If I may, and thank you. And that's that's where the language doesn't exactly meet up, because Mr. Saavedra, I said his name right earlier today. Anyway, he does represent the Southern Nevada Building Trades, and they have a jurisdiction, and the Northern Nevada Building Trades has their territory that's been assigned to them, et cetera. Same with local unions and various things. Some statewide locals. I think SEIU is statewide. I think some of the there are several that have statewide. So you would probably need to refine your language a little bit, because they technically, the Southern Nevada Building Trades doesn't represent anybody in Northern Nevada, and vice versa. Not that that's bad. That's why that language was statewide presence was confusing, and it's just not the normal term that's used.
Yes, Senator. Thank you again. Ruben De Silva for the record. Yes, we'll definitely work with all stakeholders to revisit that language there, Senator. We will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think keeping the Southern Nevada Building Trade guy on there is fine. You just need to change the word a little bit. Vince is, doing okay, and that's good, but it could just as easily be the Northern Nevada Building Trades guy if that's being done. But the statewide presence is, based on what the young lady down there was saying, doesn't match up. So we'll find a way, and either way, it's not that big of a deal. I was just trying to point that out. Thanks.
And I think Senator Daley wants to sit on the task force.
I do know.
So we got to clarify it so he can sit on there. We got you, Senator.
I definitely do not have a statewide presence. My district's in Washoe County, you know that.
Senator Daley is a constant presence in the state of Nevada. Senator, we got you. Senator Krasner, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Assemblyman De Silva, for your presentation. I was just wondering why it was decided, or why you would like to move the office, the Nevada Working Task Force, keep Nevada Working Task Force away from the Lieutenant Governor's office and to the Secretary of State's office.
Ruben De Silva for the record. Thank you for the question, Senator. So again, I know my co-presenters can probably get into more details here, but the simple reason is that the Lieutenant Governor's office didn't have the personnel to maintain and to operate the actual the task force, and the Secretary of State's office has a lot more staff. So that's really the reason why. And this was really something that the Lieutenant Governor's office sought, was to remove the task force from his office and then send it over to the Secretary of State's office, where we could just staff it better, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and if I may add, this is Rudy Pamantuan for the record. When you look at the responsibilities of the Lieutenant Governor, in addition to presiding over the State Senate, he also chairs tourism. He's vice chair of transportation. He's chair of outdoor recreation and so many other boards and commissions. And that being said, we only have a couple full-time employees within the office, And so we've got our hands full. And given the importance of this particular issue and new Americans and the immigrants, we felt that if the Secretary of State's office had personnel to dedicate to this effort and had the resources, we would be more than happy to work with them. And so we've had discussions prior to this bill being submitted, and we kind of worked through that process. And I think that we'll have a strong transition, and we look forward to working with them as the task force continues their great work.
And thank you. I don't believe we have any additional questions. Thank you, all three of you, for working diligently together. And with that, I'd like to invite you to sit back. And we'll invite those wishing to testify in support, either in Carson City or Las Vegas, for Assembly Bill 366. Seeing none in Carson City, we'll go to Las Vegas.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Bethany Kahn. I'm proudly the first-generation daughter of immigrant parents, and I'm a member of the Keep Nevada Working Task Force, and I'm proud to be here today representing the Culinary Union in support of AB 366, and we thank the sponsor for shepherding this bill. The Culinary Union is Nevada's largest immigrant organization and union. We represent 60,000 workers who come from 178 countries and speak over 40 different languages. Culinary Union has been fighting and winning for working families in Nevada for 88 years, and we are deeply committed to ensuring that new Americans have a voice in the political process and in Nevada. Since the Keep Nevada Working Task Force was created last session, committee members, including me, we've been working to protect and advocate for immigrants in Nevada, and looking forward, the task force is committed to study and provide recommendations on how Nevada can better support workforce development of immigrant communities. The Culinary Union, which is a founding member of the Nevada Immigrant Coalition, which also supports this bill, fully supports this bill, and we urge the Nevada Legislature to pass AB 366. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alma Lozoya. I'm an EVS porter on the Las Vegas Strip, and I'm a proud Culinary member for 2 years. I'm here today to support AB 366. My parents are immigrants, and I am the youngest of 6 siblings. Ever since I can remember, my parents have worked minimum wage jobs nearly 7 days a week. They work so hard so that my siblings and I could have more opportunities and have the best life possible, one that they never had. As a daughter of immigrants, our voices are important to Nevada, and I'm proud that the union helped to create Keep Nevada Families Working Task Force. Immigrants are essentials to Nevada, and our communities need to continue support and resource. I support AB 366 and ask Envy Ledge to support this bill. Thank you.
And thank you both for joining us this evening. I don't believe we have anybody else in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anybody wishing to join us over the phone in support of Assembly Bill 366?
If you would like to testify in support of AB 366, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS. And I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 366. PLAN was proud to be a part of the passage of Assembly Bill 376 in the 2021 session and the creation of the Keep Nevada's Working Task Force to develop strategies with businesses, labor organizations, and immigrant advocacy groups to support Nevada's workforce. AB 366 will facilitate the further development of this task force, and we urge your support. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Assembly Bill 366.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Deanna Huatran. That's DEANNA space HUA space TRAN. And I am the Coalition Coordinator of the Nevada Immigrant Coalition. Here on behalf of the Coalition, we are grateful for the Keep Nevada Working Task Force's diligence towards the promotion and creation of policies that protect and support our immigrant, refugee, and asylee communities. We look forward to continuing the support of the prospective efforts of the Keep Nevada Working Task Force as it transitions to the Secretary of State's office in order to continue the success of integration and economic development for all of our immigrant communities. And we also urge the committee to support AB 366. Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Assembly Bill 366.
Public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 366. BPS will start with the phone.
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Anyone in Carson City or Las Vegas? Seeing none. Next, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 366. Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas. BPS, is there anybody on the phone?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. With that, Assemblyman, any closing remarks you may have?
Thank you, Chair Flores, and members of the committee. I just urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, Assemblyman. With that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 366. And next, we will go to those wishing to join us for public comment. Is there anybody in Carson City or Las Vegas wishing to join us for public comment? Seeing none in Carson City or Las Vegas, we will go to the phone. BPS, anybody wishing to join us over the phone?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And with that, members, we will be getting together on Friday. We'll start at 3:30 p.m. We will have 3 bill hearings, and I don't anticipate them being too long. But I think it made sense for us to meet this Friday and maybe potentially have next Friday off for Mother's Day. So that's kind of what we're trying to do so that everybody kind of has a lay of the land. By the way, I asked my little brother to log on real quick. It's his birthday, so I'm just doing a quick shout out to my little brother who's a teacher here in the state of Nevada, and just wanted to say happy birthday to you, brother. Love you. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing.